London, April 1813. The ballroom of Huntington House glittered with candlelight as Catherine Darcy stood at its edge, her hands clasped tightly before her. She was determined not to reveal that this was her first proper ball, or that beneath her composed exterior, her heart fluttered with both excitement and trepidation. The cream-colored silk of her gown, modest by the standards of the ton, but the finest her family could afford, whispered against the polished floor as she shifted her weight from one satin slipper to the other. "Do try to look less like a startled fawn," Catherine, her mother, Lady Darcy, murmured beside her. "Remember, you are here to make an impression." "Yes, Mamma," Catherine replied, straightening her shoulders. She knew all too well what rested upon her slim shoulders this season. With her family's fortunes waning and 3 younger sisters waiting their turn, she needed to secure a match that would elevate them all. Across the room, a stir of movement caught her attention. The crowd parted like the sea before Moses as a tall gentleman entered, flanked by 2 others. Even without the sudden hush of reverence, Catherine would have known him for royalty. His bearing alone proclaimed it, the straight back, the confident stride, the cool assessment in his gaze as it swept the room. "Prince Philip Wentworth," Lady Darcy breathed, her fingers digging into Catherine's arm. "The Duke of Westmoreland's son! I had heard rumors he might attend, but I scarcely believed. Oh, this is fortune indeed." Catherine studied him with curiosity. The prince was handsome in the classical sense, tall, with dark hair swept back from a high forehead, features that might have been chiseled from marble, and eyes that seemed to hold all the authority of his royal lineage. Yet there was something in the set of his mouth that gave her pause, a certain coldness, perhaps, or disdain. "He looks rather severe, Mamma," she whispered. "Nonsense. He looks precisely as a prince should. And more importantly, he remains unwed at 28. They say he has been particularly fastidious in his search for a bride." "Or particularly difficult to please," Catherine murmured, earning a sharp look from her mother. The evening progressed as such evenings do, a careful orchestration of introductions, dances promised and delivered, refreshments taken, and gossip exchanged. Catherine found herself partnered with several gentlemen of good standing, if not exceptional fortune. She danced adequately, conversed pleasantly, and maintained the proper balance of modesty and engagement that her mother had drilled into her since childhood. And then came the moment that would alter the course of her season entirely. Lady Huntington, their hostess, approached with Prince Philip at her side, his expression suggesting he would rather be anywhere else in London. "Lady Darcy, Miss Darcy," Lady Huntington trilled, "may I present His Highness, Prince Philip of Wentworth." "Your Highness, Lady Darcy and her daughter, Miss Catherine Darcy." Catherine curtsied deeply, her eyes lowered as protocol demanded. When she rose, she found the prince's gaze upon her, assessing and dismissive in equal measure. "Miss Darcy," he acknowledged with the barest inclination of his head. "I understand you are new to London society." "Yes, Your Highness," she replied. "This is my first season." "And from where do you hail?" "Somewhere in the north, I presume, from your accent." "Derbyshire, Your Highness." "Ah." The single syllable contained volumes of meaning, none of it flattering. "I supposed as much. The provinces do have a certain rusticity about them that is difficult to disguise, even in the most promising young ladies." Catherine felt heat rise to her cheeks, but years of her father's instruction in maintaining composure before difficult hunting dogs stood her in good stead. "Indeed, Your Highness. Though I have always found that authenticity has its own charm, whether in people or places." A flicker of something, surprise, perhaps, crossed his features before the mask of polite boredom returned. A charming sentiment, if somewhat naive. "Lady Huntington, I believe you mentioned the Countess of Pembroke wished to speak with me." And with that, he was gone, leaving Catherine feeling as though she had been both insulted and dismissed in the span of a minute's conversation. "Oh, Catherine," her mother lamented quietly. "Could you not have been more agreeable? He is a prince." "He is insufferable," Catherine replied under her breath. "And I refuse to simper before any man, royal or otherwise, who takes such obvious pleasure in making others feel lesser." The remainder of the evening passed without further royal encounters, for which Catherine was grateful. As the musicians prepared for the final set of dances, she found herself at the refreshment table, sipping lemonade and observing the whirl of colors and movement before her. "Not dancing the last, Miss Darcy?" inquired a gentle voice. She turned to find Lord Thomas Harris, a kind-eyed gentleman who had partnered her earlier. "I find myself in need of rest, my lord," she answered with a genuine smile. "And truth be told, I have always preferred watching the country dances to participating in them." "Indeed? I would not have guessed, given your skill. You move with uncommon grace." Catherine laughed softly. "You are too kind. My dancing master would be scandalized to hear such praise. He was forever lamenting my tendency to add my own interpretations to the steps. Perhaps that is precisely what makes it graceful, that touch of originality." Lord Harris's eyes twinkled. "I, for one, find strict adherence to rules rather dull." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden commotion near the entrance to the ballroom. Sir Frederick Talbot had arrived, late, as was his custom, with his troupe of musicians from the continent. It was said he had discovered them during his travels in Austria and had been so enchanted by their playing that he had persuaded them to return to England with him. "Ah, Talbot's famous musicians," Lord Harris observed. "Have you heard them play, Miss Darcy?" "I have not had the pleasure." "Then you are in for a rare treat. They bring a passion to our English dances that is quite transformative." And indeed, as the musicians took their places and began to tune their instruments, Catherine felt a palpable shift in the energy of the room. Even Prince Philip, who had spent much of the evening in serious conversation with older gentlemen at the periphery, moved closer to observe. The music began, a country dance that Catherine knew well, but rendered almost unrecognizable by the verve and spirit with which it was played. The couples who had taken their places seemed transported, dancing with an abandon rarely seen in the restrained ballrooms of the ton. "Would you care to join them after all, Miss Darcy?" Lord Harris offered. "I would be honored." Catherine hesitated only a moment. "Yes," she decided. "I believe I would." As they took their places in the set, she caught sight of Prince Philip watching from the side, his expression a mixture of curiosity and disapproval. Their eyes met briefly before she turned away, determined to enjoy herself regardless of royal censure. The music swelled, and Catherine felt it move through her like a living thing. The strict patterns of the dance remained, but within them, she found a freedom she had never experienced in the staid country assemblies of Derbyshire. Each turn, each step, each change of hands became an expression of joy rather than mere compliance with form. Lord Harris proved an excellent partner, matching her enthusiasm with his own, his eyes alight with pleasure. As they progressed down the line, Catherine became aware of a gradual hush falling over those watching. By the time the dance concluded, the entire ballroom had grown quiet, all eyes upon the dancers, or, she realized with a flush of mortification, upon her. She curtsied to Lord Harris as the final notes faded, breathing quickly from exertion and the sudden awareness of scrutiny. "Miss Darcy," he said, his voice filled with admiration, "that was extraordinary." Before she could respond, Lady Huntington was at her side, her face alight with excitement. "My dear Miss Darcy, where did you learn to dance with such spirit? It was positively captivating." Catherine began, uncertain whether she was being praised or chastised. "I merely followed the music, my lady." Well, it was remarkable. Wasn't it remarkable, Your Highness? To Catherine's horror, Prince Philip had approached and now stood regarding her with an expression she couldn't interpret. Remarkable indeed, he said coolly. Though perhaps not in the manner one expects at a proper London assembly. Lady Huntington's smile faltered, but she rallied admirably. Oh, but surely Your Highness must admit it brought a welcome touch of vivacity to the evening? I declare I have never seen such natural grace. Natural, certainly, the prince replied. As I observed earlier, the rusticity of the provinces can be difficult to disguise. If you will excuse me, Lady Huntington, I find I must take my leave. He bowed slightly and departed, leaving Catherine standing in humiliated silence as whispers erupted around her. Well, said Lord Harris after a moment, his voice deliberately light, I believe that makes you the talk of the season before it has properly begun, Miss Darcy. No small achievement. Catherine managed a weak smile, but inside, mortification warred with indignation. How dare he? To dismiss her so publicly, to imply she was somehow unworthy of the Tun's approval because she had danced with genuine feeling rather than calculated precision. I believe I should find my mother, she said quietly. Thank you for the dance, Lord Harris. It was truly a pleasure. As she made her way through the crowd, she heard snippets of conversation that made her cheeks burn. Never seen anything like it. Quite shocking, really. The prince's face. As if he'd bitten into a lemon. But did you see how everyone watched her? Even old Lady Egerton couldn't look away. By the time she reached her mother, Catherine had composed herself enough to present a calm exterior, though inside she seethed with a mixture of embarrassment and righteous anger. We are leaving, Lady Darcy announced in a tight voice. Immediately. Yes, Mamma, Catherine replied, relieved at the prospect of escape. It was only as they waited for their carriage that Catherine realized her mother's distress stemmed not from the prince's cutting remarks, but from Catherine's supposed impropriety. To dance in such a manner! As if you were at some rustic harvest festival rather than in one of the finest ballrooms in London. Lady Darcy lamented. And before the prince himself. Oh, Catherine, how could you? I danced as the music moved me, Catherine defended herself. And from what I heard, most of the assembly found it refreshing rather than scandalous. It matters not what most of the assembly thought. Prince Philip found it distasteful, and his opinion carries more weight than all others combined. Then his opinion is disproportionate to his discernment, Catherine replied, her patience finally snapping. For he judges without understanding and condemns without cause. Catherine! Her mother looked genuinely shocked. You cannot speak of a prince in such a manner. Cannot I? When he speaks of me as if I were some untutored peasant. When he dismisses an entire county as rustic without knowing its beauties or its people. Catherine shook her head. I will show proper respect to his position, Mamma, but I cannot respect the man if he behaves without courtesy or kindness. The arrival of their carriage prevented further argument, but the tension between mother and daughter remained palpable during the silent journey home. As Catherine prepared for bed that night, she couldn't help but replay the evening's events. The prince's dismissive words still stung, but underneath the hurt lay a surprising core of defiance. Let him think her beneath his notice. Let him dismiss her as provincial and unworthy. She would rather dance with true joy than move through life with his cold perfection. She had no idea that across London, in a royal residence, Prince Philip Wentworth was similarly awake, his thoughts troubled by the memory of a girl who danced as if the music lived inside her, and by the unexpected stirring of his own heart as he had watched her. The following morning brought a flurry of callers to the Darcy residence, an unprecedented occurrence that left Lady Darcy alternately bewildered and elated. Lady Huntington herself, she exclaimed after the third visitor had departed. And the Countess of Pembroke? Catherine, whatever happened last night has made you the object of curiosity, at the very least. Catherine, who had been subjected to thinly veiled inquiries about her unique interpretive talents and refreshing country style all morning, merely nodded. Curiosity is not admiration, Mamma. Perhaps not, but it opens doors nonetheless. Lady Darcy handed her a stack of invitations that had arrived with the Morning Post. 3 additional balls, a musicale, 2 dinner parties, and a garden breakfast. All from families of the first circle. Despite her lingering mortification, Catherine couldn't help but feel a flutter of excitement. Perhaps her unconventional dancing hadn't ruined her prospects after all. The next fortnight proved her mother right. Wherever Catherine went, she was received with eager interest. Matrons studied her as if trying to discern what quality had captured the attention of their social circle. Young ladies alternated between friendly overtures and barely concealed envy. Gentlemen sought introductions and, once obtained, inevitably requested her hand for at least one dance. Only Prince Philip remained aloof. Catherine encountered him at several events, but he never approached her, though she often felt his gaze upon her when he thought himself unobserved. When their paths did cross, he offered only the most minimal acknowledgment required by courtesy. It was at Lady Pembroke's ball, a fortnight after the Huntington affair, that circumstances forced them into closer proximity. Catherine had just finished a quadrille with Mr. Oliver Reed, a charming if somewhat verbose young man, when she found herself standing near a cluster of potted palms that partially concealed a small alcove. From within, she heard voices, one of which she recognized immediately as the prince's. "Cannot understand your continued resistance, Philip," a female voice was saying. "She is everything one could wish for in a princess, beautiful, accomplished, and from one of the oldest families in Europe. Princess Sophia is undoubtedly all of those things, Aunt Augusta," the prince replied, his tone weary as if this were a familiar argument. "Yet I find I cannot summon any enthusiasm for the match." Enthusiasm? What has enthusiasm to do with marriage at your level? It is about alliance, continuity, suitable heirs. Your father is growing impatient, Philip. He expects an announcement before the season ends. And he shall have one. I am not insensible to my duty. I merely wish to be certain. Catherine knew she should move away. Eavesdropping was inexcusable, but curiosity held her rooted to the spot. Certain of what, precisely, the lady demanded. That she will make you happy? My dear boy, happiness in marriage is entirely a matter of chance. Far better to secure harmony through shared rank and understanding than to chase some romantic notion of compatibility. There was a pause, and when the prince spoke again, his voice had softened. Do you truly believe that, aunt? That happiness is merely chance? My parents. Your parents were fortunate. But for every match like theirs, there are a dozen where mutual respect and common purpose must substitute for warmer feelings. At least at first. Another pause, longer this time. Perhaps you are right. But I would hope for something more than mere suitability. Such as the excitement provided by that provincial girl who caused such a spectacle at the Huntington ball. The woman's tone had sharpened. Oh yes, I heard about your interest in her display. Really, Philip, admiration for a pretty face and lively manner is all very well, but you must remember your position. Catherine felt her cheeks burn. She had to leave before she was discovered, but at that moment, Mr. Reed appeared at her elbow. Miss Darcy! I've been looking everywhere for you. You promised me the supper dance, remember? His voice, never quiet at the best of times, seemed to echo in the sudden silence from the alcove. Catherine grabbed his arm and attempted to pull him away, but it was too late. Prince Philip emerged from behind the palms, his aunt, a formidable-looking woman with steel-grey hair and penetrating eyes, beside him. "Miss Darcy," the prince said, his expression unreadable. "How convenient to find you here." Catherine dropped into a curtsy, mortification rendering her momentarily speechless. "Your Highness," she finally managed. "I was just, that is." Listening to a private conversation, his aunt suggested, her tone frigid. "No. I mean, not intentionally. I had just finished dancing and was catching my breath before Mr. Reed claimed his dance. The prince finished for her, his gaze flicking to the bewildered gentleman. "How fortunate for you both." He offered his arm to his aunt and brushed past Catherine without another word, leaving her standing there, humiliation and indignation warring in her breast. "Well," Mr. Reed exclaimed, oblivious to her distress. "Was that the prince himself? Capital. Most capital. I've never been so close to royalty before. Did you see the diamond pin in his cravat? Must be worth a small fortune." Catherine barely heard him as he continued to chatter, her thoughts in turmoil. The prince thought she had been deliberately eavesdropping, adding yet another black mark against her character in his estimation. And worse, he had heard his aunt speak of her so dismissively, with no correction offered on his part. The evening, which had begun so pleasantly, now stretched before her like an endless ordeal. She went through the motions of dancing, dining, and conversing, but her spirit was absent, her smile forced. It was nearly midnight when an opportunity for escape presented itself. Lady Pembroke had arranged for musical entertainment after supper, and as the guests gathered in the music room, Catherine slipped away to the adjoining conservatory, seeking a moment of solitude. The glass-enclosed space was dimly lit and blissfully empty, fragrant with the scent of exotic blooms. Catherine moved among the plants, trailing her fingers along glossy leaves, breathing deeply of the warm, humid air. Here, at least, she could drop the mask of polite society and allow her true feelings to show. "It appears we share a preference for solitude, Miss Darcy." The voice startled her so thoroughly that she nearly toppled a potted fern. Prince Philip stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the light from the music room. "Your Highness," she gasped. "I didn't realize anyone was here." "Evidently." He stepped further into the conservatory, allowing the door to close behind him. "You seem to have a habit of appearing in unexpected places." The implication was clear, and Catherine's momentary discomposure gave way to indignation. "If you are referring to the earlier incident, I assure you I had no intention of overhearing your conversation. I would never stoop to such behavior." "No?" His eyebrow rose skeptically. "Yet you remained rather than announcing your presence or moving away." "I was about to leave when Mr. Reed appeared." I could hardly explain the situation without drawing even more attention to the fact that I had overheard something not meant for my ears. The prince studied her for a long moment, his expression inscrutable in the dim light. Finally, he gave a slight nod. "A fair point. Perhaps I was hasty in my judgment." The admission, small as it was, surprised her. "Thank you, Your Highness." An awkward silence fell between them. Catherine was acutely aware that they were alone in a secluded space, a highly improper situation that could damage her reputation beyond repair if discovered. "I should return to the music room," she said, moving toward the door. "My absence will be noted." "Miss Darcy." His voice halted her. "Before you go, I find myself curious about something." She turned back cautiously. "Yes?" "That night at the Huntington ball. You're dancing." He seemed to search for the right words. "It was unlike anything I have observed in London society." Catherine tensed, expecting another critique, another dismissal of her provincial ways. I am aware that I gave offense, she said stiffly. I assure you it was not intentional. Offense? He looked genuinely surprised. No, you misunderstand me. I was not offended. I was. He paused again. Intrigued. Intrigued, she repeated, uncertain whether to believe him. Yes. You danced as if the music truly moved you. As if you felt it rather than merely counted the steps. There was something in his voice she couldn't quite identify, a wistfulness, perhaps, or a question. It was refreshing. Catherine studied him, trying to reconcile this assessment with his previous dismissal of her. That is not what you said at the time, Your Highness. A shadow crossed his face. No. It was not. He moved to a stone bench positioned among the foliage and sat, gesturing for her to join him. After a moment's hesitation, she did, maintaining a proper distance. May I speak plainly, Miss Darcy? I believe you have already demonstrated that tendency, Your Highness, she replied before she could check her tongue. To her surprise, a smile touched his lips, the first genuine one she had seen from him. Indeed. Though perhaps not as plainly as I might have. He looked down at his hands, elegant in their white gloves. The truth is, your dancing disturbed me that night. Disturbed you. The word stung more than she cared to admit. Yes, but not for the reasons you might think. He raised his eyes to hers, and in their depths, she saw a complexity she had not noticed before. It disturbed me because it reminded me of something I had forgotten, or perhaps never truly known. The joy of movement for its own sake. The freedom of expression without constraint. Catherine was silent, unsure how to respond to this unexpected confession. You see, Miss Darcy, those of us born to certain positions learn early that every gesture, every word, every expression must be carefully controlled. We become so adept at this that we forget there might be another way to live. His voice had softened, becoming almost confessional. When I saw you dance, it was as if a window had been opened in a stuffy room, letting in fresh air and light. He broke off, seeming to recollect himself. I reacted poorly. For that, I owe you an apology. The music from the other room swelled and faded, marking the passage of time as Catherine absorbed his words. This was so far from what she had expected that she hardly knew what to make of it. Thank you, Your Highness, she said finally. I accept your apology. He nodded, seemingly relieved. I also wish to apologize for my aunt's words. She is protective of my position and sometimes speaks more sharply than she intends. There is no need to apologize for another's words, Catherine replied. Especially when they contain a measure of truth. I am provincial compared to the ladies of your circle. I have neither their polish nor their connections. Perhaps not, he acknowledged. But you possess something many of them lack. And what might that be? Authenticity. He smiled again, and this time it reached his eyes. The very quality you defended in our first conversation. Before Catherine could respond, the door to the conservatory opened, spilling light into the dim space. Lady Pembroke stood there, her eyebrows rising at the sight of them. Your Highness! Miss Darcy! I had no idea you were out here. Her tone was carefully neutral, but her eyes darted between them with undisguised curiosity. The final piece is about to begin, and I believe your mother was looking for you, Miss Darcy. Thank you, Lady Pembroke, Catherine said, rising quickly. I was just admiring your magnificent orchids. Indeed? How fortunate that His Highness could identify them for you. He has quite an interest in botany, I understand. The prince stood as well, his composure perfect once more. Miss Darcy has an appreciation for beauty in all its forms, Lady Pembroke. A quality to be encouraged, I think." With a slight bow to Catherine, he offered his arm to their hostess and escorted her back to the music room, leaving Catherine to follow at a discreet distance, her thoughts in greater turmoil than before. The following days brought no further private encounters with the prince, though Catherine saw him at various social functions. Each time, he acknowledged her with a bow that seemed somehow warmer than before, and once or twice, she caught him watching her with an expression that sent a curious flutter through her chest. Meanwhile, her dance card remained consistently full, and invitations continued to arrive with gratifying regularity. She found herself genuinely enjoying the company of several gentlemen, particularly Lord Harris, whose quiet wit and genuine interest in her thoughts made their conversations a pleasure, and even made a few female friends among the younger set. It was Lady Amelia Foster, daughter of the Earl of Westfield, who brought news that set the ton abuzz with speculation. "Have you heard?" she whispered to Catherine as they sat together at Lady Morton's musicale. "Princess Sophia has returned to Bavaria. Apparently, there will be no royal betrothal this season after all." "Indeed?" Catherine kept her voice carefully neutral, though her heart beat a little faster at this information. "I was unaware such an arrangement was even being considered." "Oh, it's been the expectation for years. Their families have been in negotiation since the prince was in short coats, or so my mother says." Amelia leaned closer, her voice dropping further. "The interesting part is that the princess departed quite suddenly, and without any public farewell. Some say there was a terrible argument between her and the prince." "Gossip is rarely reliable, Amelia," Catherine cautioned, though she couldn't help wondering if the conversation she had overheard had been part of a larger conflict. "Perhaps, but my brother is friends with Lord Edward Vance, who is a close companion of the prince, and he says that His Highness informed his father he would not marry where his heart could not follow." Amelia's eyes gleamed with romantic satisfaction. "Is that not wonderfully poetic?" Catherine murmured an appropriate response, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Could it be that their conversation in the conservatory had affected the prince more deeply than she had realized? Or was she allowing vanity to suggest a connection where none existed? She had little time to consider the question, for the next day brought an invitation that overshadowed all others. Their Majesties would be hosting a ball at Carlton House, and the Darcys were among those invited. A royal ball! Lady Darcy clutched the embossed card as if it were made of gold. "Catherine, this changes everything. To be acknowledged by the Queen herself, it places us firmly within the highest circles." "It is a great honor," Catherine agreed, though privately she wondered if a certain prince had influenced the guest list. "But mamma, I have nothing suitable to wear for such an occasion." This practical concern led to a flurry of activity, visits to modistes, milliners, and shoemakers, all conducted with an urgency that left Catherine's head spinning. The result was a gown of celestial blue silk, embroidered with silver thread in a pattern of stars and crescent moons. With it came matching slippers, long white gloves, and a head-dress of silver leaves and pearls that nestled among her dark curls. When the night of the ball arrived, even Lady Darcy was satisfied with her daughter's appearance. "You look every inch a lady of quality," she declared, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Your father would be so proud to see you thus." The mention of her father, gone these 3 years, brought a lump to Catherine's throat. "I wish he were here," she said softly. "He would have laughed at all this fuss, but oh, how he would have loved to see the palace." "He is here in spirit, my dear. And I believe he has been guiding your steps all along." Lady Darcy straightened the fall of Catherine's shawl with hands that trembled slightly. "Now, let us go and show the royal court that the Darcys of Derbyshire belong among them." Carlton House was a blaze of light, its grand entrance lined with liveried footmen bearing torches. Inside, the magnificence took Catherine's breath away. Gilded ceilings soared overhead, crystal chandeliers sparkled like cascading diamonds, and everywhere she looked, the elite of society glittered in their finest array. The formal presentations to the king and queen passed in a blur of protocol and nerves. Catherine curtsied deeply, murmured the appropriate responses, and somehow managed not to trip over her gown or say anything amiss. The queen, a small woman with shrewd eyes, studied her with particular interest. "Miss Darcy of Derbyshire," she repeated after the introduction. "We have heard interesting reports of your dancing, young lady." Catherine felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "Your Majesty is too kind to take notice." "We take notice of many things, Miss Darcy," the Queen replied with a faint smile, "including the effect of natural grace upon those accustomed to artifice." Before Catherine could decipher this cryptic statement, she was ushered along to make way for the next presentation, her mind racing with possibilities. Had the Queen just given her some sort of approval? And if so, for what? Once the formalities concluded, the ball began in earnest. Catherine found her dance card filling rapidly, with both familiar partners and new acquaintances eager to stand up with her. Lord Harris claimed the first dance, his kind eyes warm with admiration as he led her onto the floor. "You outshine them all tonight, Miss Darcy," he said as they took their places. "Even the diamonds in the royal collection pale in comparison." Catherine laughed, relaxing into the familiar patterns of the dance. "You are a flatterer, Lord Harris. But I thank you for the sentiment. Not flattery, but simple truth. And I am not the only one to think so." He nodded discreetly toward the edge of the ballroom, where Prince Philip stood in conversation with several gentlemen, his gaze repeatedly straying to Catherine. She pretended not to notice, though her heart beat a little faster. "The prince is merely ensuring all his father's guests are enjoying themselves, I'm sure." "Is that what you truly believe?" Lord Harris asked, his tone curious rather than jealous. "That his interest is merely courteous. I believe His Highness has far more important matters to concern him than the daughter of a minor baronet," Catherine replied, executing a perfect turn. "And I would be foolish to imagine otherwise." Lord Harris studied her thoughtfully as they circled each other. "You are many things, Miss Darcy, but foolish is not among them. Nor is false modesty becoming in a woman of your intelligence." The dance separated them before she could respond, and by the time they came together again, the moment for such personal observations had passed. Nevertheless, his words lingered in her mind as the evening progressed. It was during the supper break that Catherine finally found herself face to face with Prince Philip. She had retreated to a relatively quiet corner of the supper room when he approached, bowing with formal correctness. "Miss Darcy, I trust you are enjoying the evening." "Very much, Your Highness," she replied, dropping into a curtsy. "Their Majesties have created a magnificent occasion." "Indeed." He gestured to the empty chair beside her. "May I?" "Of course." He sat, adjusting the ceremonial sash that crossed his chest with an unconscious gesture that spoke of long habit. Up close, she could see the fine lines of fatigue around his eyes, though his posture remained impeccable. "I have been watching you dance," he said without preamble. "You have not lost that quality I admired at Lady Huntington's ball, though perhaps you express it more discreetly now." Catherine wasn't sure whether to be pleased or offended by this observation. "One learns to adapt to one's surroundings, Your Highness." "Does one? I wonder." He selected a grape from the plate before them, studying it rather than meeting her eyes. "I find I have been considering adaptability a great deal lately. How much one should conform to expectations versus how much one should remain true to one's nature." "A philosophical question," Catherine remarked. "And one to which I imagine different stations in life yield different answers." Precisely. Now he did look at her, his gaze direct and searching. Those in elevated positions often sacrifice personal inclination on the altar of duty. It is expected, accepted, even celebrated. While those in more modest circumstances may have greater freedom in some respects, though less in others, she finished for him. You understand perfectly. A smile touched his lips. I have come to believe that balance is possible, however. That duty need not exclude happiness, nor position authenticity. Catherine's breath caught at the intensity in his voice. That seems a wise conclusion, Your Highness. I had help reaching it. His hand moved as if to cover hers, then withdrew. Miss Darcy, Catherine. Whatever he had been about to say was interrupted by the arrival of his father's aide-de-camp, a distinguished-looking gentleman in full military regalia. Your Highness, forgive the interruption, but His Majesty requests your presence immediately. The Austrian ambassador has just arrived. The prince's expression betrayed a flicker of frustration before smooth courtesy reasserted itself. Of course. Please inform His Majesty I will attend him directly. He rose, bowing to Catherine. Miss Darcy, I hope we may continue our conversation later. There is a matter of some importance I wish to discuss with you. With that enigmatic statement, he was gone, leaving Catherine to wonder what he might have said had they not been interrupted. The remainder of the evening passed in a haze of dancing, conversation, and speculation. Though Catherine watched for the prince's return, he remained occupied with royal duties, visible only at a distance. As the hour grew late, she resigned herself to the likelihood that their conversation would have to wait for another occasion. It was well past midnight when the Darcys' carriage finally rolled away from Carlton House, Lady Darcy bubbling with excitement over every detail of the evening. Did you see how the Duchess of Richmond sought you out specifically? And Lord Farnsworth asked for 2 dances. And the Queen herself remarking on your grace, I could scarcely believe my ears. Catherine made appropriate responses, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying her brief exchange with the prince and wondering at its meaning. He had called her Catherine, a familiarity that both thrilled and unsettled her? And what was the matter of importance he wished to discuss? Her musings were interrupted by a sharp rap on the carriage roof. They slowed, then stopped altogether as the coachman's voice called down, begging your pardon, my lady, but there's a royal messenger asking us to halt. Lady Darcy's eyes widened. A royal messenger? At this hour? Whatever can it mean? Before Catherine could hazard a guess, the carriage door swung open, revealing a liveried footman bearing the royal insignia. Behind him, to her astonishment, stood Prince Philip himself, his breath clouding in the cool night air. Your Highness! Lady Darcy gasped, halfway between delight and alarm. This is most unexpected. Forgive the irregular approach, Lady Darcy, he said, his tone formal but his eyes fixed on Catherine. But I find I cannot wait until tomorrow to complete a conversation of great importance. Lady Darcy glanced between them, understanding dawning on her face. With remarkable presence of mind, she said, perhaps I should step out for a moment to admire the night air. That would be most gracious of you, my lady, the prince agreed, offering his hand to assist her. Once Lady Darcy had been escorted a discreet distance away by the footman, Prince Philip took her place in the carriage, sitting opposite Catherine, whose heart was now racing so rapidly she feared he must hear it. Miss Darcy, he began, then shook his head. Catherine, I hope you will forgive this unconventional approach, but I found I could not rest without expressing myself clearly. Your Highness, Philip, please. At least for this moment. Philip, she amended, the name feeling strange on her tongue. I confess I am at a loss to understand what could be so urgent it requires stopping a carriage in the middle of the night. A smile touched his lips. When you phrase it thus, it does seem rather dramatic. But then, you have had a dramatic effect on me since the moment I first saw you dance. Catherine's breath caught. I don't understand. Don't you? He leaned forward, his expression earnest. From that first night, when you moved as if the music lived inside you, you have challenged everything I thought I knew about propriety, about worth, about what truly matters in this life. I never meant to challenge anything, she protested. I was simply being myself. Exactly. He reached across the space between them, taking her gloved hand in his. That is precisely what I needed, someone who would be authentically herself, regardless of circumstance or consequence. Someone who could remind me that beneath the weight of crown and country, I too am simply myself. Catherine stared at their joined hands, scarcely daring to believe what seemed to be happening. Philip, what are you saying? I am saying, Catherine Darcy, that I was wrong to call you unworthy that night. The truth is quite the opposite. It is I who have been striving to be worthy of you. His grip tightened slightly. I am saying that in a world of calculation and artifice, your genuine spirit has awakened something in me I feared long dead. I am saying that I love you, and if you could find it in your heart to consider me, not as a prince, but as a man, I would be the most fortunate of souls. The words hung in the air between them, sincere and unadorned. Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes, overwhelmed by the truth she read in his face. You love me, she whispered. Truly? With all my heart, he replied simply. Though I have done a poor job of showing it thus far. A laugh escaped her, half joy and half disbelief. Indeed, your initial method of courtship was rather unconventional. Most gentlemen don't begin by insulting a lady's background. He winced. I deserved that. And I will spend a lifetime making amends, if you will allow it. Philip. She turned her hand in his, interlacing their fingers. I have come to care for you as well, despite your rather inauspicious beginning. But there is so much that stands between us, your position, my lack of rank, the expectations of the crown. All obstacles that can be overcome, with courage and determination. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. My parents have given their blessing. It was the Queen who urged me to follow you tonight rather than waiting for a more conventional opportunity. The Queen. Catherine gasped. Then her comment about the natural grace and artifice was her way of saying she approves of you, he confirmed, smiling. She has always been more perceptive than most give her credit for. Catherine shook her head, trying to absorb the magnitude of what was happening. This seems like a dream. If it is, I hope neither of us wakes. Philip slid from his seat to kneel before her in the confined space of the carriage, still holding her hand. Catherine Darcy, will you do me the very great honor of becoming my wife? Of bringing your authentic spirit, your joy, and your remarkably expressive dancing into my life permanently. The teasing reference to her dancing startled a laugh from her, even as tears spilled down her cheeks. Yes, she said, her voice clear and certain. Yes, Philip, I will marry you. His smile was radiant as he rose just enough to frame her face with his hands. May I, he whispered, and at her nod, he leaned forward to place a tender kiss upon her lips, their first, but far from their last. Outside the carriage, Lady Darcy observed the silhouettes of the embracing couple and permitted herself a small, satisfied smile. Provincial they might be, but the Darcys of Derbyshire had qualities that transcended rank or title, qualities a wise prince had recognized and cherished. And somewhere, she was certain, her husband was watching with pride as their daughter prepared to dance her way into history, authentic and true to herself until the very end.